Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss the intersection of social, local, and mobile. Our goal is to help you understand these topics so you can integrate them into your marketing and advertising. Today is April 17th, 2012, and this is episode number 15. In this episode, we'll be discussing Foursquare, Google+, Kickstarter, Clout, and much more, so stay tuned. How's it going, Adam?
It's going all right. How are you doing, Corey?
Doing well. Got the taxes filed, got that all squared away, so we are set.
Yeah. It's one of those things that no matter how, it's not like the day changes. Of course, sometimes it gets pushed back a couple days like this year, but how many times do you really get your taxes done early?
Well, in the past, I've got it done a little early, but yeah, it's good to know that I'm not alone in my procrastination on getting that done. There was definitely a line out the door at the post office of everybody trying to get it stamped and certified and sent away. So.
Well, yeah, in that case, I might have screwed up because I got there a little bit later. And I know that those guys, I got I think it was after 5, I ended up putting it in the mailbox over there and directly at the post office. And we'll find out if we got there the day before, the right day or the day after. But usually I think those guys try to be a little bit extra accommodating on the tax day, but I don't know. That's wishful thinking on my part. But funny enough is that you talked about going to the post office. I don't know if you've ever seen those. Are they called the SOMI cards or some cards? The ones where they take kind of the old school line art and they allow you to put your own captions on these little graphic cards. That you can send off to people or whatever, but I frequently see them being shared on Facebook and other places. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, some e-card.
Some e-cards, that's what it is. Yeah. And so I honestly had never been to the site. I've seen a lot of people, put some pretty topical stuff into their Facebook feed. And I said, I'm going to go check this out. I just want to play around with this a little bit. And so I went over there and found one that it looked like a crowd of folks potentially with pitchforks or shotguns or something kind of crowding this corridor to someplace in the background. And then in the foreground, it had this kind of, very kind of old school pioneerish type of person standing there and pointing. He's looking forward, but he's pointing backwards at the crowd. And I wrote something like, just arrived at the post office, and I guess I'm not the only one that forgot today was tax day, and ended up sharing it on Pinterest. And immediately, it's probably one of the most repinned graphics that I've ever put into any Pinterest account. On Pinterest, excuse me. I think it struck a nerve with some folks.
Very nice. So you're content creating around tax day, staying relevant. That's a good tip for everybody out there. Stay relevant, stay topical.
Right.
Yep. Seize the opportunities. One of those opportunities that just passed up actually was Foursquare Day. So yesterday, April 16th, it actually started out as a community-generated event, but people said, well, April 16th, 4, and then you take 4 and square it, and you get 16. Let's just call April 16th Foursquare Day. And so now Foursquare as the company has actually adopted this day and sort of celebrates it and promotes some of the events that are going on across the country. And part of the blog post that announced Foursquare Day from them was announcing some new official numbers. So Foursquare doesn't always post their updated numbers, but every once in a while they'll give kind of an insight into what's going on with the network. And they actually shared that they now have more than 20 million users, and those 20 million users have generated over 2 billion check-ins. So definitely some impressive numbers coming out of Foursquare, though I was actually a little surprised. The 20 million user mark seemed lower than I would have expected, given the length of time that Foursquare has been around and just the fact that, really with Gowalla out of the picture, it's kind of the leading check-in service now. What was your take on that? Did that surprise you at all, Adam?
When you compare it to some of the other services out there, I think you look at it in comparison to other location-based services, it's probably right on the mark, right?
Right.
But due to its focus on location versus, say, Facebook and Google Plus and others who are using location as kind of an added feature versus the core underpinning of what they're all about. Those those services like Facebook, obviously, for instance, it's pretty much kind of like this tacked on thing, like as well as I know, many years ago, a lot of folks said when Foursquare and others were starting to really blossom, that eventually location would become would essentially just be a feature.
Right.
And so it would be really hard for Foursquare to have to differentiate itself to prove that it could be more than just simply kind of an early, what do they call it, a first to market network based off of one feature. And so I think that now that they've made some of those changes that they have recently with having menu information on their site and on all of their mobile app, and then expanding to kind of let you explore your area a little bit more, almost like moving in the direction of Yelp. I think it'll be a little different with those numbers as time progresses. But currently, it's still kind of about who feels comfortable or not comfortable enough to share their location with folks.
Yep. Yeah, and Foursquare actually said that they're seeing a pretty large shift in terms of the way people are using it towards, like you said, more of an information portal. So they actually don't, at this point, need every one of their users to be checking in and blasting out those check-ins. They've got enough data from existing users and from that core group of passionate users that they're still getting recommendations for things, and they're still getting lists built of recommended places or recommended trips. But new users can really get additional value out of the service just by kind of examining what's around them. And you mentioned the menu feature. I think that's a fantastic feature, and I'm actually seeing it start to pop up at more and more places around me. And I would say if you're listening to this show and you've got a restaurant or bar of any kind, definitely make sure that your menu information is included in Foursquare, and especially if it's going to change on a semi-regular basis. So my wife and I go to a local bar, and they have a rotating selection of beers on tap, but sometimes the menu is a little hard to read, and you can't exactly see the name of the beer on all the tap handles, but we can pull up Foursquare and actually see the most updated list of beers through the Foursquare app. So it's kind of our go-to way of getting that information now, which I think is interesting. So definitely something to check out if you fall into that category of managing a business, bar or restaurant.
Yeah, and the interesting time, the first time I kind of ran into the menu thing, I had ended up going with some friends for the first time to BJ's Brewhouse to have a lunch, and I had never been there before. And of course, there's a big fat line at the beginning. And what do you do when you're waiting in line? You break out your mobile phone, or at least I do, right? And you check in on Foursquare, and when you check in, you're doing that ahead of time, unless you get right in and you sit down. And so suddenly I saw that there was this menu there, and I got a chance to look at it. The only downside for me, and likely for other users, was the fact that the menu is definitely not visual. It's just the text, and so I got familiar with what was there, and then I could kind of take that knowledge once I sat down and explore a little bit more. But it's interesting nonetheless to be able to use Foursquare a little bit more like a tool in that sense.
Yeah, and like I said, just making sure that because it's out there and people are potentially going to stumble upon that information, the very least you should do is make sure that if they do happen to use it, that the information is correct and that you're not odd man out with no information attached to your location. So just something to check on. But another thing that they talked about, which I thought was interesting, is a couple of the promotions that companies were doing in relation to Foursquare Day. So a couple of the bigger ones that stood out is Bing was actually giving away some Nokia Lumia 900 phones to 6 random winners who followed them on Foursquare and then shared their check-in with a specific hashtag. And then McDonald's was actually giving the first 10 people that shared their McDonald's check-in every hour a free t-shirt. And they ran that promotion for a good chunk of the day. So I thought those were both good examples of, really small scale, but still nice ways of rewarding people that are checking in. They are sharing those check-ins with their audience. So, they're sort of, the users are giving value back to the company by checking into that place and then sharing it and saying, hey, this is a place that I go to and enjoy. And so the response from those companies is to say, hey, we appreciate that. And here's a little swag or a little give back, and builds up that reciprocal relationship and reinforces the behavior, which I think is a smart thing to do. It makes a lot of sense. And so, even for companies that aren't the size of Bing or McDonald's, just remembering the occasional thank you for the people that really are using a service like Foursquare and promoting on behalf of your brand goes a long way towards building loyalty. And whether that's just a nifty take on the mayor deal, trying to find something new, or, a random giveaway to somebody that happens to publish out their check-in. I think the giveaway element of Foursquare, though, for a while it was what they were most well known for, has kind of been forgotten to a certain extent. And so maybe it's time to revisit that and see what kind of audience you've got going on Foursquare, and then find a way of rewarding that audience.
And over the last year, they've provided a lot more kind of do-it-yourself tools. So there's, in the past, it was kind of a pain in the butt. You really had to get a hold of folks over at Foursquare and get their ear and get them to work with you. And of course, they seemed to work a little faster with larger brands than they did with maybe ones that were a little smaller. But now there's a lot of tools that allow you to manage the stuff on your own. So it really is just as viable a place to be, especially for location-based, brick and mortar type businesses, as say Facebook is, in a sense. Of course, you got a larger audience at one place or another, but Foursquare really could be looked at as your location-based outpost, and you want to look and see if people are even using Foursquare to reach out to you anyways. You should be looking there just the same as you should be, monitoring whether or not people are talking about you on your Yelp account or things. These things do impact business, especially, if it's out of sight, it's not out of mind for at least the folks that are using it. So you should kind of do an audit of all those things, and Foursquare is one of those places to check.
Yeah, definitely. So, Adam, are you privileged to the new Google Plus layout? Have you checked that out?
Yeah, are they rolling it out or not? Because for me, I could swear that the moment that I heard folks talking about it, it was up for me. How about you?
It was up for me as well, though I heard some people were having issues with either pages they were managing not getting the new layout, or the page they were managing had it, but then their own account hadn't made the transition. But from what I can tell, I think most, if not all, users at this point have access to the new Google Plus layout. What do you think of it?
I love it, actually.
Yeah.
I think they there's always room for improvement in all different ways, but I think that it was quite a surprise. I don't know about you, and this might be the geek thing for me, but when I wake up, besides the usual things of checking email and all that, I usually look to see what's the trending stories on Twitter, and Google Plus was trending, and I'm like, what's going on here?
Did they shut it down? Or
did they shut it down? Did it get acquired by Instagram?
Oh,
and so. It was interesting to hear what people were talking about, and I went and looked at it, and it's a really young network, and to see it change, it's pretty drastic, right? It's a big refacing of the entire thing.
Yep.
Within, we're talking it's only been 8 months or something like that.
Less than a year.
Yeah, less than a year that it's been out, and so to me, this talks a lot to the fact that Google's serious about this, and what they did was not because, oh, hey, we're completely failing, we need to we need to quote unquote pivot. Right. I don't believe that was the case. I believe that they really looked at what was going on, and then they improved upon things based on what they saw happening, based on the way people were using things, and so on. And so I think they did an excellent job. They gave things that were very bare bones previously a little bit more polished. So those folks who are maybe more used to using Facebook and other networks that have been around for a while, and were maybe averse to coming over to Google Plus because they felt it felt maybe too, I don't know, unfinished.
Yep.
They might change their mind a bit. I think there's a lot more finish across the entire site. And then the features, they've added a couple little features here and there, but what they've done to the features, like especially Hangouts, for instance, where Hangouts were quite hidden before. For the average user, you'd go and say start a Hangout, or you'd see a Hangout in the flow of what people were sharing. Now you go to a Hangout section and it pulls together all of these Hangouts that are available for you right there. So if you're really eager in participating in this, or even getting folks to participate, there's now this hub that's there. And in all honesty, there may be some of these things that had been tweaked and so on even before, so that I might have missed, because as we've discussed in the past, I mean, I've been active on Google Plus, but very slightly active. I mean, nothing compared to other networks. Primarily for the reasons kind of things being a little bit scattered, and therefore folks who were interacting on it, at least in my circles, were a little bit more on the tech savvy early adopter side. And I'm really eager in kind of checking out what people are doing from a more mainstream perspective, in addition to those early adopters.
Right.
But I think the changes are awesome. I was playing, actually, knowing that we were going to have on we're going to talk about on the show. I was playing a little bit more with the search and stuff today, and they've got some really intricate search stuff on Google Plus that is nowhere near as nice. Excuse me, the search stuff on Google Plus is far nicer than search on Facebook.
Interesting.
If Facebook had the same sort of search, I mean, if you search for something at the top of Google Plus, you can actually filter it down to the type of content that you want. You can filter it down to location. So, for instance, today I was looking for Golden Gate Bridge, and I just said I want to see only people that are posting about the Golden Gate Bridge in the San Francisco area, and it gave me specifically that. And then you can save that search and so on, so that you could go back to it later. So now it's giving you tools that are more helpful in the sense of being able to do things like monitor your brand or monitor for potential leads. Take a look at your competitors. Of course, they've always had the Sparks. So those could allow you to use those to take a look at specifically topics that you wanted to. So it was more like, here are posts and articles that are related to this spark that you've created. But the search, again, is something you can even take a look at stuff from a very specific circle. And so I think the way they let you dice it up is much better than what Facebook offers at the moment. It's just a matter of, well, the data that's available obviously is much less because of the smaller audience that's on Google Plus. And then, of course, they changed the look and feel of the profiles, and those profiles look a little bit more timeline-ish, at least. I mean, the top part of it does. Of course, the rest of the content isn't in a timeline format, but it's got the big graphical banner across the top now, with your image, your profile image off to the right. So it allows you to be a little bit more expressive. And even in exploring that, I found that they allow you to go back to the old way, where you could have more than one image, kind of like in a grid across the top. Yep. Or just kind of lined up, or you could use this nice big image to be a little bit more expressive. And I saw some folks using it in some really interesting ways. Primarily the Google brands really set up their profiles very nice. They, of course, had a little bit of preparation time to get that far.
And they got to show best practices and inspire people to think about their own profile. The thing that I thought was interesting is Google Plus sticks the profile picture on the right and Facebook sticks it on the left, which means if you've created a custom image for Facebook that sort of takes into account the location of the profile picture, you're probably going to have to create a brand new image for Google Plus, which is a little frustrating, I would say. It would have been nice if it had it in a similar area so that you could just take the image that you probably just recently created for your Facebook timeline and maybe make a few small adjustments, but now it sort of needs a reconfiguring. But visually at least, they definitely put a focus on the visual elements. So in addition to that big top banner image, they also made images and videos within the stream of content bigger and more interactive. So they've obviously seen a lot of success with that photography community and learned lessons from that. And they've really put a big focus on photo and video assets. And I think we're seeing this with a number of social networks. You know, we've even talked about it on this show, where visual assets and getting your brand message across visually is an important skill to master. And I think that the Google Plus redesign reinforces that and makes it, you know, another proof point of brands needing to really figure out the way they want to express themselves through images and photos and video.
Completely agree.
Nice. So do you think this will be the reason that Google Plus suddenly explodes now that it's a little easier to use, it's a little cleaner? Are we suddenly going to see a transition, or is it still going to be a struggle for them to build up that network?
I think what it does is, so the brand pages were all good, you know, but they weren't really fun to visit. They were a little bit mechanical in the way that they felt when you went to them, because they were really more about just posting content, and they still are for the most part, but this gives them a little bit more personality. I think one of the most interesting things that I've seen is, I know that a while back ago, I mean, probably, 5 months ago or so, that Google made the announcement of their on-air product that you and I keep waiting for the public to have. And I'm not sure at what rate they've been increasing this release of the product. And so just for the listeners, the on the air is imagine a hangout is on Google Plus is a place where you invite or you make it open to have a video conversation with up to 9 other folks. And so you have a total of, and I always keep forgetting, is it a not total of 9, including yourself, or a total of 9 in addition to yourself?
Total of 9 in addition to yourself. There can be 10 total people in a hangout.
Okay, that's what I thought. And I thought that would be just a weird number to stop at 9. And so you got 10 people in there in total, again, including yourself, and you can have a video conversation. You could show Google Documents. You could look at a YouTube video. You can just interact with each other and even chat and such. So that's been kind of it takes a while to have some traction with that, but there's been celebrities and politicians and thought leaders and such who have all used Google Plus to kind of test things out and see if people are into interacting with them using stuff like that. Well, it's hard to do that kind of stuff and really take it to its full potential when you only have 9 total slots in it, not including yourself, to do this. And so they released their or announced their on-air hangouts, which essentially is like live streaming a hangout of, again, up to the 10 people total, but anybody else who wants to watch can watch it without participating in it. So they are actually just going to it and watching it just like a streaming thing on Ustream or any other sort of streaming video show, where Corey and I, for instance, could do our podcast and you could see both of us talking to each other, and then we could make it available to everybody or streaming, whoever wants to join it. It looks like they've been slowly pushing it out there, and just before they made the announcement for Google Plus, or just before they launched the new face of Google Plus last week, there was an announcement about them starting to roll out the YouTube live streaming service a little bit more to brands. And as you know, Corey, YouTube is owned by Google. And when I checked out some of the on-air stuff, I've seen that when you click on it, if you aren't watching it directly, I forgot exactly what part I clicked on, but that essentially the on-air product is being run by this the YouTube live stream product.
Yeah, and I think it actually is creating a YouTube asset on the fly. So I believe that YouTube sort of serves as the back end, and once you are done with the on air, it spits out a final YouTube video that, unless you choose to keep private, just becomes part of your brand page.
Exactly. And so I find that interesting. I find that kind of under the hood development going on where brands wouldn't likely make that connection unless they were to click and go over and go, oh, well, because eventually that's going to be what's a big deal is you probably have an audience over on Ustream, and you've got, of course, a lot of opportunity of discovery on YouTube because there's just so many people that are using YouTube, much more obviously than say Google Plus as a community. And so there could be this cross pollination that happens where when I went and clicked on one of the live streams, I was actually able to go to YouTube and see it there with a live chatting session going on to the right of it. And so there's this integration that's happening between those two where I think that could really be the killer feature, or one of the first killer features for Google is the ability to let brands be more engaged with folks with this video, and it being so closely connected to YouTube could make a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of brands doing this with other services as well. So I don't know if you've ever seen small businesses or even individual people that have their own, they've built up their own brand around what they do, and they're using SlideShare to actually host sort of DIY webinars. And so they'll run through a slide deck, and you can actually use a SlideShare service to attach live video to that deck and let people tune in, and you can walk them through a presentation. And so I think that same sort of idea easily transfers over into a Google Plus Hangout. So Google Plus Hangouts has a newly opened API that you can actually program applications against. So one of those applications is a slide sharing presentation tool. So you could run a sales presentation through Google Plus Hangouts, let people tune in live, let people experience it, chat back and forth. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. You could potentially get either an influencer or a voice within your industry to have a discussion and maybe connect them with someone in your own brand and have a few questions back and forth, and then open it up to the audience and get some audience engagement. There's really a lot of opportunity there for brands to create smaller kind of town hall feel and get their community involved in a live real-time discussion instead of just putting content out there and then waiting to hear responses back. I think the live element of that adds a lot to that feeling directly connected to a brand that's so important.
Yeah, and it's not unlike something on Ustream and such, but they're not pulling in advertising, to my knowledge. They might be doing it on YouTube, but I'm not sure they're doing it on Google Plus and such. So I think that's a killer feature. And I mean, I'm looking right now and I'm finding, a half a dozen at least on-air hangouts that are happening right at this very moment. And I'm a little envious because normally I get in on things very early and get access to it, just like you, Corey. And I looked at a video. I looked it up on YouTube. I said, "How do you get into Google Hangout, on-air Hangouts?" And saw this guy talking about how he got on it and all this stuff. And the very first thing he says is, "Well, if you got an invite," and I'm like, "You son of a gun!" So he shows that there's a few steps to go through to get it all set up and ready to go. And really, it is an integration with YouTube.
Yep.
So, anyways, I think that's what's most exciting to me in the future. So at any rate, I think people should go back and take a look, clean up their Google Plus page, because it's going to look different than what they expected, or than the way they left it if they haven't been back there for a while. And to do things like set up a few searches and kind of maybe for your brand and for phrases that people might use to use services that you offer, or buy a product that you have, and start engaging with folks again. I think Google Plus still has that little sweet spot right in the middle where it allows people to openly follow you, but at the same time you can kind of have a closer connect. You can have a more what do you want to say? A more specific and kind of limited connection with certain folks. And a lot of this layer of technology that they're adding on top of it, I think will make for some very interesting and different ways to interact with folks in comparison to other networks like Facebook, for instance.
Yeah. So another network that actually recently announced brand pages and sort of caught me off guard. I don't know if you were expecting this or not, but Clout is actually creating brand profile pages. This was actually really interesting news, I thought. So the only brand currently that has one, they're sort of using it as a beta test, is Red Bull, and makes total sense to me. Red Bull is the perfect brand to test something like this with, because they've got a ton of really passionate fans who have online influence, love talking about the brand. But basically what the Clout profile page is a place for influential users that talk about a specific brand to gather and aggregate the conversation around that brand into one place. And it's also a way for the brand in turn to offer exclusives or communicate with those influencers. So it's kind of, in my opinion, letting more people peek behind the curtain at the Clout influencer scores and some of the data that they're using to hand out some of these perks. And it's really making that data more public, which I think has the added advantage of really boosting the amount of interaction that people are likely to do with brands once they know their actual place in terms of ranking for influence on a brand. So Red Bull, it actually breaks it up into the top 10 and then the remaining top 100 influencers. And then on the right-hand side of that page, you can see the latest activity from those influencers as it relates to the brand. And then what they're going to do is actually give out perks to those various groups. So it sounds like the top 10 are going to get really, sweet perks, potentially even VIP Red Bull experiences, which could include like a trip to the X Games. So some really high value perks. And then the top 100 are getting things like merchandise and access to the Red Bull lifestyle magazine that they put out. So I think it's a really interesting way of letting other people into the ranking and influence level of a specific brand.
Yeah, it kind of took me by surprise. You were saying at the beginning, I don't know if this surprised you or not. Yeah, it did take me by surprise. We see Clout kind of in a way. It's got its incentivizing mechanism for folks to kind of give a plus K to this person or that person for being influential in particular topics, and now to kind of put this in it just kind of puts it out there, like you said. It just puts it out there and says, look, here are the people, period. Yep. Here are the people that are the top 10. Here are the people, the top 100. I think it's actually also going to change behaviors of Clout users in a pretty significant way. This is much more transparent on the part of brands, and then therefore folks who now can understand a little bit more about what they might get if they are specifically Clout influential in certain topics. And so one of the things that I noticed when I took a look at it today was on the right-hand side, they have their little feed that says latest activity. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that, and I'm looking at it again right now, that it says that, this particular person added Red Bull as one of their influential topics. Now what's going to happen is somebody who sees a perk that they really, really want, they know specifically what they need to do or build towards in order to get that perk. And maybe if they feel they should be influential in Red Bull, and they now see that Red Bull is really kind of, got some skin in the game and is participating in this, they want to add that topic, which you can do on Clout. You can, they give you a certain amount of K per day, which is their little currency that you give around to folks who are influential. But you can take a certain amount of your K and you could use it for yourself or others and put a particular topic that you're influential for. Now, you still need to get people to interact with that and give you plus K in that to kind of, in a way, confirm that, yeah, you are indeed influential. And of course, it becomes a thing that people can game. But previous to this, I've gotten and you've gotten, Corey, plus K for different things. Like ever since we started this podcast, it's the first time that we've done officially a podcast in an ongoing fashion. And so now we've got podcast as a topic that, because we tweet about it, we share it and so on. And we've started to gain some influence in podcasting on Clout. Now people are actually adding Red Bull as a topic, and that means that they're going to somehow need to vie for attention in that topic and try to get people to go over and give them plus K in order to be more influential or to make their way into the top 100 or potentially the top 10.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is why wouldn't they be influential in Red Bull already on their own if they really cared about it?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely the potential for gaming in the system and inauthentic kind of promotion just to try to get retweets and get up on that list and acquire some of those perks. So it'll be interesting to see how behavior evolves. And I think we'll see a lot more of that with Red Bull specifically than we would when this rolls out to other brands, because I think it's going to be, assuming they open this up to a decent sized number of brands, it's going to be a challenge to keep an eye on that list, and then every time a new brand gets announced, add it to your topic list and then talk about it a bunch and try to get people to retweet those tweets just to show up on these lists. So it'll sort itself out over time, but I think we're definitely, and especially for Red Bull, given the quality of the perks that they've already announced, we're definitely going to see people try to game that system and talking more about Red Bull than they normally would just to show up on this page.
And to a large extent, that's an advantage for brands. I mean, and that's the reason they're going to use it.
Yep.
Because they've got people now vying for their attention, and then therefore sharing content in order to do that. And so it's scary and interesting and cool, all kind of wrapped into one. And so I'm really going to keep my eye on this because it's kind of potentially the new frontier of incentivizing, having a spot to incentivize folks, similar to like Foursquare. We just talked about specials and so on. I mean, this is essentially influence specials, right? Mm-hmm. Versus check-in location-based specials. So Clout really is kind of taking a model that's already been elsewhere and is applying it to their the way that they do things. So it's going to be really, really interesting to check out. And I think what's going to happen is, whether it be months or longer, because some of these guys take such a long time to incentivize folks, I'm sitting here on the page and suddenly it says Red Bull awarded you a perk.
There you go.
What the heck is going on? Why did Red Bull reward me a perk?
Well, Adam, they've obviously tuned into the live recording of the Solo Mo show.
That must be what it is. I mean, it says requires. Oh, I see what's going on, Corey. I see what's going on. This is pretty awesome. It's all happening live.
Breaking news.
So it says, join the Red Bull community to claim this perk. Requires 5+ K, add topic. So what's happening is, I've been on the page long enough, for whatever reason, for it to basically say, why don't you add us as a topic for you? Mm-hmm. And then of course I still have to kind of fight for it a bit, to really get popular with it. But it's almost like adding it as a topic is akin to liking something on Facebook.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here and suddenly it's telling. So that's why all those folks were adding Red Bull as a topic, because it's got a mechanism to ask you to do so.
Yeah, maybe you're saying to the cloud system, well, I haven't talked about Red Bull before, but I do like Red Bull. I've maybe liked them on Facebook, or I follow them on Twitter, and now that I know, I'm happy to talk about Red Bull a little more than usual, exchange for Red Bull then thanking me via the Clout system. So it's sort of being transparent with that relationship and saying, look, we're giving away some cool stuff, and you probably already like the Red Bull brand, but maybe you just don't talk about it on a daily basis, but here's your excuse. Maybe throw out a little tweet or a little Facebook mention and just reinforce the fact that you like us, and we'll reinforce the fact that we like you. Exactly. Wow. This is pretty interesting. You heard it live on the Solo Mo show. Very nice. And just another thing that I think they're doing, which we'll return to, I think actually in our next story, but I do think it's interesting that they're being very transparent with their data, and they're actually showing you from 1 to 1,000 who the most influential people are about Red Bull, and being open with that and saying, look, here's your spot, and here's exactly the rewards that we're giving people, and here's the exact breakdown of who those rewards are going to. And I think that goes a long way towards people feeling a little more involved and not feeling like it's a shady system that, suddenly something pops out and they have no idea why they did or didn't get access to it. So sort of opening up that communication line and saying, look, this is what we're doing, and if you want to be a part of it, here's what it takes to get involved, I think is an important lesson for brands to keep in mind.
Yeah, so should I spend $5K? What it's saying is it's going to give me 1 year subscription to the Red Bulletin, which is essentially, I guess, their magazine that they have for the iPad and print. And so I find it interesting, and this is what other brands should expect, right? That Clout will likely convince you to have something to incentivize folks to initially add you as a topic to their list of influential topics, which again is akin to liking it on Facebook. And so you get rewarded with something that, like, for instance, it's probably something they give out for free, quite honestly.
Right.
Or it's something, it's a marketing magazine, but it's likely pretty cool and exciting because of the photos or video it has and so on, based on the Red Bull brand. But they initially want you to provide something as a perk, and then from there, so anybody who has it, who's an influencer at all with Red Bull, meaning anybody who has it as a topic, would get one type of perk, and then the top 100 would get another perk, and then the top 10 would get another perk. It sounds like that's kind of the model that they're going for, and they want to gamify and the whole experience in the sense that they're rewarding people to kind of compete for higher influence. And the most, just not to kind of beat a dead horse with all that we're saying, one of the interesting things that the whole dynamics of this is that to be on Clout means to not just be able to give K and all that stuff within Clout, but the fact that it's connected to all your social networks. So by talking about these things on almost any of the social networks that you're connected to with Clout, it feeds into Clout. So this is like one of the first places that you could talk about something frequently on Facebook or frequently on Twitter, or maybe even via WordPress on a blog that you have, and it could influence what's happening on elsewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think Clout needs to get a little bit more. Part of their article about this as well was that they were going to be adding more networks to the list of networks that you can attach to your Clout score, to your Clout account. And so I think that's where it's really, really interesting is you could talk about Red Bull in 5 different places on the web, but it all funnels back into here potentially about what your potential influence score is on that topic.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, well, unless we spend the rest of the episode talking about Red Bull and trying to boost our own influence score, I think we should hop over to the next topic, which
all right.
I don't know if you're a watch wearer, Adam. Do you wear watches as part of your daily attire?
I do. If I'm working on my computer, I try to take it off because a metal watch and an aluminum MacBook Pro clanking around together doesn't work too well, but I like wearing a watch.
Not always the best of friends. Well, for those of us that are both iPhone owners and watch wearers, the Pebble is actually breaking new ground, and as far as I know, it is the new go-to standout success for a Kickstarter campaign. So Pebble is an e-paper watch that actually syncs with your iPhone or Android phone through some included applications, and it uses Bluetooth to stay in sync with your phone, and it can actually transmit information to the phone or receive information from the phone. It's actually made by the guys that made the Impulse watch that connected to the BlackBerry and did a similar thing. And just today, actually just within the last couple of hours, it crossed the $4 million pledge mark on Kickstarter, which is astounding. That blows my mind. When it crossed the $1 million mark, I was like, holy cow, this thing is crazy. But now it's $4 million worth of funding with 30 days to go. So, who knows where this thing's going to stop. To get to those numbers, 17,900 people have pledged $115, which buys them a watch. 6,000 people pledged $125, which buys them a watch in their own favorite color. 220 people pledged, I'm sorry, 1,200 people pledged $220 to actually get two watches, and the numbers go up from there. So really what's interesting about this, and I don't want to focus too much on the watch, because I actually think that the trend this represents is more interesting than the actual numbers behind this specific Kickstarter scenario. So just the idea that within a couple of days, literally tens of thousands of people were willing to lay down money for a product that they've never seen in real life. It technically doesn't even exist. There's like a prototype out there, but it's not like this thing is in some warehouse ready to get shipped. It's still going to be a few months before all the kinks get ironed out and these things actually end up on the doorstep of the backers. But I think the trend that this represents is really interesting. And the fact that given enough interaction and enough faith in a company, people are willing to lay down cold hard cash in even anticipation of a product that may meet their needs, or meet a need that they didn't even know they had before this product was announced.
Yeah, it seems like as Kickstarter becomes, and the products and such that are being featured on there become more visible and talked about, because it seems like sites like Mashable and others have been making it a habit to cover things that they feel is interesting on Kickstarter, almost in an effort to promote them. The spin a little bit is about like, hey, take a look at this really cool thing, or look at the story behind the fact that this thing is getting so much funding. But then all that does is propel it even more.
Yep.
Because people see it, they think it's cool, and then they want to spend some money on it. And so we seem to be finding products continually getting funded at a higher and higher rate, especially in comparison to what they are being asked, what they're asking folks to fund.
Yep.
So they're saying like their funding goal is like $300,000, and then suddenly within 48 hours they have $1 million, and it's like, oh my gosh. And then suddenly again within a few days after that, they've got, now we're talking $4 million. I forgot where I had seen it, and we don't want to go into the business model stuff too much, but somebody had mentioned how they felt that Kickstarter was going to be one of the biggest kind of not earth shattering, but one of the most kind of almost revolutionary sites, or one of the biggest sites of the next year or two, because of this whole model of, folks are just sitting there going, hey, I've got this idea, and I've done this amount of work. And by the way, do you think it's cool? If you do, give us a couple dollars, or give us this and give us that. And then suddenly, you've got enough capital for more than just, what a seed stage company might get. You've got something what a startup would be looking for.
Yeah.
And so it's quite amazing. And I think that the takeaway really from that, not as about the funding as much as it is about the interaction that the community has with the companies and folks that are trying to look for funding, because they have to be very transparent, and they have to earn a level of trust. They have to prove that they know what they're doing to a certain extent. They put content out there and share a lot, including creating videos and fielding questions with their community, and eventually build up a certain level of trust that enables them to turn around and get hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars from their community.
Yeah.
And that's proving that there's, they have passionate folks out there that may have never heard. These guys, you said they've done the Pulse Watch, which I had actually honestly never heard of until I heard them talking about it. But there are other folks on there that don't have the notoriety of having worked with large brands in the past, on other products, or having worked on popular products in the past even. They just have a really cool idea that they're able to deliver and articulate and communicate really well to folks and get them on board. And again, $4 million is awesome. There's 30 days left from what I saw.
Yep.
30 days left. That leaves them enough room that if they really, they could get $10 million easy.
Right.
Which would be mind blowing.
Yeah.
And so, I think that brands can take a look at kind of what does it take for these folks to really build this level of rapport with their audience, and how could you take away this same sort of thing where people are really eager to not only do things like provide you input and give you ideas and tell other folks about it, but also open their pocketbooks ahead of time and almost fund the product before it even is fully developed.
Right. And fund it when it's still in development. So after they crossed the $1 million in funding mark after 28 hours, they came out and said, well, hey, this thing support is way beyond our expectation. We're going to start adding features. So the first thing they did is say, well, now it's going to be water resistant. And so before they weren't going to focus on that as much, but they said, hey, given the support that we've seen, we're going to spend a little extra time and make sure that if you're out there and it starts raining, that the watch is going to be okay. And so kind of letting people behind the scenes and say, look, we haven't thought through every little detail of this thing, but we're willing to experiment and learn and get feedback from consumers and respond back to that feedback. So I think one thing that they've done well at, and which a lot of these successful Kickstarter campaigns do, is have a two-way dialogue. And before the funding phase even concludes, they're saying, hey, we appreciate all the support we've received. What do you guys want to see from this thing? What haven't we thought of? What additional features do you want us to consider? What colors should we do? What packaging would be best? And really putting the core of the idea out there and saying, hey, we know how to make a very solid watch, but we're not exactly sure what other features we should integrate. So we want to get people involved in that process. And I think it's interesting that they do have a proven track record, because potentially what keeps a lot of companies off of Kickstarter is they think, oh, it's only for, these small startups and this is their first product and they're trying to, make a name for themselves on Kickstarter. But really, any small business could take an idea for a product they have, and maybe they haven't had a chance to fully flesh that out, but put it out there and say, hey, is this something that you guys want? And, I've thought about it and I think it would be a good product, but I still don't know all the details, or I don't know exactly the features that would make this a success. So help me design it. Help me bring this thing to life and be a part of the process. And I think, as we're seeing with projects like this watch here, consumers are more than willing to get involved and support something that doesn't yet have all the details ironed out, but still has an idea that they believe in.
Yeah, it gives given me a little spark to turn around and think of something that I wanna release with that. I've talked with family members in the past about being that have hardware design experience, and I remember the response has always been, it's too expensive to do hardware. And then you look at what's going on with Kickstarter, and that most of what they release, most of the products that are getting funding are products, but hardware, right? They're tangible items. They're not necessarily software. There are some video game company type things going on over there, but it's incredible, the possibilities, and the takeaways are important for everybody, no matter whether it's a small Kickstarter like company or not.
Yeah, definitely. So there was a story that came out that had some interesting data points that I wanted to share with the listeners and maybe get your take on, Adam, and see if this rang true, or if some of these numbers seemed a little too fuzzy, or maybe a little higher than you had expected. So the study is called...
Let me have it.
All right, it's called U.S. Consumers Receptive to Social Media Appearing on Their TV Screens. And it was a study run by Accenture. And the two numbers that stood out were nearly 2/3, or 64%, of U.S. consumers surveyed recalled seeing social media symbols such as the Facebook like while watching television. And then further, 1/3, or 33%, surveyed said they had actually interacted with the symbols while watching TV, and that could include things.
They walked up to the TV and pushed their finger on the TV.
Exactly. In the TV of the future, you just press that button right on the screen. But no, it included things like they liked that program on Facebook. That was 20% of respondents. They would scan a QR code. They would search for a hashtag on Twitter, or they would use Shazam to actually scan the audio of the show. So a bunch of different interactions, but I think a third of people seeing a social icon and actually responding to it is impressive. And it goes to show that people are willing to take those actions. I think there's always the question of, if I just stick this social media symbol on the end of my TV spot, are people really going to interact? And this study seems to indicate that yes, they are. Does that jive with what you're feeling on it, Adam, or does this number seem inflated?
I mean, I think when you were talking about, what you just said about whether or not people would in fact interact with things. I mean, I think what you're doing is you're mocking what I've said in the past. When I say that in a funny way, because I didn't really think that it would get that much. I mean, we talked about this with a couple different things. We talked about, I think it was the Lowe's commercial with Pinterest and some of the other ones. And so, the bottom line is it takes little effort to do, and it doesn't intrude on the message of your commercial.
Right.
If it's 30% or if it's 10%, it doesn't mean you should take it off, right? If it's 10%, it doesn't mean you should take it off of the commercial. I think it's one of those low level things. It's kind of like putting your Twitter name on your business card. Maybe people will go look at it. Maybe people won't, but it's not going to hurt your business card if you leave it on it.
Right.
And so it does seem like it's a little higher than I expected. I think the whole, what was it, 64% or something like that, is that's doable. The 33% is the one that feels a little inflated, because I think, of course, people recognize, hey, there's a Facebook icon and there's a Twitter icon, Pinterest, and so on. But actually, like, what do they do? They've got their device right there, and they go and they take a look, or they go and they like their page or whatever. I think part of the thing too is in the past, most of the time it's just the icon is slapped on that commercial and it's just left as is with no kind of like call to action or any of that. And then funny thing is that the last couple weeks, I've actually seen more very clear call to actions in regards to why somebody should go to Facebook. Go to Facebook and do this, or do. It's primarily Facebook that's usually the one that they have a very clear call to action. Go do this, go do that at our Facebook page, or go tell us about this, or go share that. So I think that's where it'll be much more interesting, that you'll be able to know, because you're driving folks to a specific area, whether or not you're having a real impact, and you're giving people, rather than telling them, oh, you should like us on Facebook. Really? Why should I like you on Facebook? well, if you say you're going to you find out our weekly deals or whatever the case may be, I think that you're bound to get an increase in engagement and interaction because of that.
Yeah. And actually, one of the brands that I wanted to draw attention to for having done the social call to action well and really done it simply, but at the same time done it completely, and I think is sort of a good example to look to if you're wondering to yourself, okay, well, how do I add a call to action to something and then actually let people respond to it, is Starbucks. So Starbucks, actually one of my favorite brands in terms of the way that they really innovate with digital and go out there and try things and see what works and learn lessons and they aren't afraid to experiment. What's the saying of the show, Adam?
Always be experimenting.
Always be experimenting. Exactly. They're a leader in that. So they've actually created a program called 5 More, and what they're saying is
we're going to charge $5 more for our coffee because it's that good.
Yeah, they said if they don't get 2 million new Facebook likes, they're charging $5 more per cup of coffee. So actually, what it was is they're really attaching themselves to the idea of summer. And so they said, what do you want 5 more of during summertime? Do you want 5 more minutes of daylight? Do you want 5 more cannonballs in the pool? And so if you go to the site, and we'll include a link to the site in the show notes, you can actually watch the ad that they use. And it's really more of a brand building ad. It's just a bunch of people running around doing fun things, carrying around a Starbucks cup. But then at the end, they have this social call to action, and it says, what do you want 5 more minutes of? Use the hashtag 5more to share. And then on that page, they're actually aggregating a bunch of the really popular networks. So they've got Instagram, and every photo, or I'm assuming there's some sort of moderation, but photos that have been tagged with hashtag 5more are automatically brought into this page, and they scroll through, so it feels very active and it feels very live. And then below that, you've got 5more on Twitter, so any tweet that includes hashtag 5more is automatically brought into that page, and it scrolls, and you can see these tweets that were sent anywhere from just a few minutes to a few hours ago. And if you then read something and you're like, oh, well, I want to participate, I want to show what I would do with 5more, they actually have a button right there that you can click to bring up a new tweet window. And then below that, another one, they've got 5 more minutes on Facebook. So they've actually created a Facebook comment box, and it's just asking people what they want 5 more minutes of. And then if they respond inside of that box, it automatically reposts that content onto Facebook and shares it with that person's Facebook community. So, the top 3 networks there all brought in pretty smooth, pretty seamlessly. All it takes is a hashtag, and then they're able to create this microsite that really feels alive and feels social and feels communal. I thought that was a great example of taking a TV spot and connecting it to all these various social platforms in a way that made sense, but wasn't over the top and wasn't, this huge expense to Starbucks to actually get this thing up and running.
Yeah, I mean, simple. It really is. It really is simple. It gets people engaged, I mean, it's straightforward. Starbucks is, we've talked about, I think, some of the more engaging companies that we always actually refer to, larger brands that seem to be experimenting and playing with things. Those are, Red Bull and Starbucks and American Express, and so they always tend to not be afraid of just trying things out and seeing how what kind of response that they get. And so I think this is a pretty interesting thing, especially kind of leveraging Instagram. They're doing it in a way that, like, out here in the Bay Area, it's the 75th anniversary for the Golden Gate Bridge. And the NBC Bay Area out here has been also promoting this contest for, your best photo of the Golden Gate Bridge with a specific hashtag. And they make it quite simple, and I think they're pulling it into some places on their website and such as well. And I don't remember if they're giving out prizes or something. And so once you learn the mechanics of how this stuff works, it's really not that difficult with just a little bit of technical know-how, a little bit of design, and some planning and so on to pull stuff together in a little bit of a creative way, without spending an obnoxious amount of money on trying it out. And what you try it out, you test it, you see how things work, and then if it's really awesome, then you take it up a notch the next time that you do it.
Yeah, and I think I don't want people to think that this is only applicable to the end of a big budget TV spot. I think you could have a call to action that includes a hashtag on things like banner ads or radio buys, or even something you're printing out and handing out in your business. I think the idea of kind of unifying conversation around a hashtag and then aggregating that conversation into a central place is sort of the key takeaway from this. Not just that it takes millions of dollars worth of TV budget to get people to tweet about your brand or talk about your brand on Facebook.
Yep.
Nice. All right. Well, what do you say we wrap it up, Adam?
I say, funny enough is we have at least one listener live here, my friend Michelle, and she didn't believe me on Facebook. She's telling me I don't believe that you guys are doing this live, and so now that we're doing it live. She was about to scramble and ask us a question on Twitter. And so rather than put the pressure on her, I'd say, hi, Michelle, how are you doing? Thank you for listening. We're here every Tuesday right after 8, and we are indeed live. And so anybody who wants to listen to us live, we encourage you to do so. And that on that note, unless I get the most earth-shattering question coming through Twitter at this very moment, I think I've proven my point, and we can wrap up the show.
All right. I've actually got a challenge both to the live listeners and to anybody listening to the recording. We're going to test this out and see how it works. But the challenge is actually to find an interesting use of the Facebook timeline. So Facebook rolled out the timeline redesign, and I think there's some interesting use cases floating out there for brands that are experimenting with it. And so the one that I'll point people to as an example is facebook.com/beardgrower. That's beard as in the facial hair, grower. And we'll actually include a link to this in the show notes so you can make sure you're visiting the right page. But
it's a little disturbing, I saw so far.
It's sort of an art project, and it gives people pieces of beard, which you can then add to this timeline. And then if they like your edition, they'll approve it onto the main page. And it creates this really long timeline with all these kind of crazy hand-drawn beard kind of scrapbook-looking thing. And so I think it's a really interesting example of thinking outside the box and playing around with the Facebook timeline a little bit. So send us your discoveries or interesting uses of the timeline that you found, and we'll share those in the next episode, and maybe find a couple of our own as well, and really talk about some interesting ways that brands are experimenting with the timeline. So if you do find something, feel free to send it our way. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. So if you'd like, you can reach the show via Twitter at SoloMoShow, or I can be reached directly at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi.
We also have pages on Facebook, Google+, and Pinterest. So if you search for us there, you should be able to find us. I know Facebook's nice and easy. It's just facebook.com/SoloMoShow. And then on Google Plus and Pinterest, just go ahead and search for those. Or if you go to solomoshow.com, there's actually links to all of those networks. And if you'd like to keep it old school, you can also email us. It's solomoshow@gmail.com. And both Adam and I check that, so that's an easy and great way to get in touch with us. And both send us your Facebook timeline recommendations, as well as any questions, suggested topics, feedback, or even to just say hi. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to get to know our audience, hear what you're interested in hearing more about, and maybe if you've got something you want us to discuss, we can integrate it into a future show. So definitely reach out and just say hi. And as with every episode, all of the links that we've discussed today, as well as links to the channels that we just mentioned, can be found in our show notes, which are available at solomoshow.com or within the podcast player of choice that you use to listen to this. We include them in the podcast, and so you should be able to select an option that'll show you the show notes, and inside there you'll find a whole collection of links that you can use to click through to all the various things that we discussed today. And then just a reminder that if you are subscribed to our RSS feed, make sure you've grabbed the new one. We merged over to a FeedBurner RSS feed, so just check your RSS feed and make sure it's got feedburner.com in there. And then, once again, we do ask that if you like the show, head on over to iTunes and give it a rating. It really helps us to get the show out there, build the audience, get more people involved in the Solomo community. And so it only takes a couple minutes, and we'd really appreciate it if you searched for Solomo Show on iTunes and just gave it a rating. And you don't even have to type anything. You can just go there. They've got 1 through 5 stars. You just click the number of stars that you want to give the show, and that
5.
Adam says 5, and that'll actually help us to show up on some of these rankings and charts that they have in iTunes.
Become famous. That's what we keep talking about, man. When we're not recording, we want
all about getting famous. Exactly. And with that is yet another successful Solomo show. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Take care.